Whew, all right. Hello. Hello, our Cranian. How's it going? Nice to see you. Xavier, Roberto, good morning. I guess, I don't know your time zones, so I guess it's morning for me. Whew. All right. I'm feeling a little slow this morning, so I'm not sure how long we're going to go today. Maybe a little longer than usual. We usually go for about 4 hours. But we'll see. How are y'all doing this morning? I think that so last week we got some stuff working. So we can place machines with a virtual grid. We can spawn in NPCs that now have animations. We can take stuff from those NPCs and bring it over to the machine and put it in. And then after about 10 seconds, it should give us back. 11 p.m. Usually finish watching the video during the week. Yeah, that's fair. It's done, so we pick it back up and run it back over to this person, and then they leave the store, so to speak. I didn't see if the NPC stopped. So the NPC doesn't stop here. And also the other thing that is currently an issue is the player always has the walking animation as well. That's because we didn't do any of the player bias stuff last week. We only did the NPC animation. So I think the first thing I'll do is bring back all of the NPCs now that we've fixed the issue that we were seeing last week. So our spawn code for an NPC is somewhere in here. And we do some stuff that we'll be able to remove in 0.15. Looking forward to that for finding where to spawn in a mesh or sampling a mesh. And then the randomness we have defined here, which I think actually we controlled via the assets, right? We just commented everything out. Noon in Brazil, nice. Wake up late, work late, still taking morning coffee. Yeah, fair. This is pretty early for my general like wake up time. I would probably prefer regularly to wake up a little later. I've found that I need to wake up probably about 2 hours before I stream, just to eat breakfast and get myself ready for the stream and whatnot. So I'm getting up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays, and then we stream from like 8 to 12. So it's like a full day by the time I'm done streaming almost. Let's see, GLTFs. So it's going to be the GLTF polls here. So we'll just uncomment all of the other options. Also, as we saw last week, not all of the animations work for all of the default characters. I don't think we're going to worry about that for now, but in the future we may go back. Again, these aren't really intended to be the final meshes and stuff, the final characters. So I don't know how much I want to actually like hard code to this character set and not. Let's see, NPC. All right, so now we have a bunch of different people coming in. They all run to the exact same spot and don't collide with each other at all, which is wonderful. 6 a.m. is when you go to sleep. Yeah, I actually do my best work between like 2 and 4 a.m., I think, historically. There have been times in my life when I've been able to sustain like a 2 to 4 a.m. like work cycle. And there are times in my life when I just can't. And I'm always less productive when I can't do that. And I don't know why. I have no idea. Okay, so we've got a bunch of different characters. The animation graph is being dynamically constructed now, so we're no longer using this RON file that we used to use. No distraction from work at night. Yeah, no distraction from anything at night, right? Nobody else is up. It's nice and cool, too. The temperature usually drops. Okay, mini characters. Tenua animations is what I was looking for. Okay, so the way we drive the animations with the customer NPC currently is via the animation transitions component. Wherever I've put that. I guess this is called move customer, right? The first thing we could do is to pick a different animation if the customer isn't moving. Oh, you saw a PR that sorted out improved docs for the animation graph and stuff? Maybe we go check that out. It's the animation graph implementation. From clips. I saw from clips. Is that the one you mean? Let's make this bigger so people can actually see it. From clips got implemented, which was nice. It's a little bit of a quality of life improvement. It doesn't really help what we were doing last week all that much, because the only difference is when we build our graph, you just don't have to specify like the graph root or whatever. So not a huge difference for us on that, but I definitely definitely said, hey, this is good. I don't see anything, but I'm sure I'll see it this week. If it got merged, then I'll see it tomorrow if I haven't seen it already. Some of the curve stuff is going in for colors this week too, I believe. Okay, so where's our animation transition? That looks like it's picking up something that is not what I want it to do. Game scene. The into iterator is what caused the compiler bug for you. Oh, interesting. Okay, so we're doing this. We're doing repeat animation transitions. I wonder. So one of the things that I was encountering with the player in the past is that if we went straight from an animation that moved the leg bones to one that didn't move the leg bones, they wouldn't like move to the right location. You think that's the one? Yeah, okay, so that's just a new default initializer. So I don't think there's too many more or like documentation pieces here. It just adds this from clips function, and the from clips function basically just takes what we did with, I think it's right here, right? Animation graphs. No, that's where we already built the graph. Did we build the graph in when we're spawning? I forget where we built it. No, we build it in that special load function. Process loaded GLTF. So instead of doing add clips here, right, we've got our animation graph, and then we've got graph, add clips, a bunch of clips. It would just be animation graph from clips, and that would be it. So not a huge improvement in terms of like the code that you need to write, but it is a nice quality of life thing. Because like, then you don't have to explain what 1.0 means, and you don't have to grab the graph root or anything like that. Fixed in nightly with next solver. Yeah. Great. Definitely no problems with that at all. And sarcasm. Okay, game scene move, init animations. So we're just automatically playing, in this case, animation 3. I think we'll have to query for animation transitions in the move. So move customer, transform with animation player. In transforms, we are doing this stuff. And I guess this is where we would play the next transition for this target, or for this entity. I guess we don't want to... I actually don't know if animation transition pops off when it's done or not. I feel like it doesn't. Yeah, recursion to deep error while resolving traits. Yeah, so this will control everything for us. We'll need the player, we need the new animation, and we need the duration for playing. So this is only for customers, so we know they have an animation transitions at this point. So maybe we do animation transitions. I don't know if this will affect anything later. Transform here. And then we're just kind of mutating transform, right? Transform translation at distance. So if we have made it to our target effectively within some margin of error, then we're popping the target and removing the path. Otherwise, we're sending them to the next target if there is one. So it's actually not in here that we would need it. It is in here because we would be stopped. I guess really idle animations should only play after they've been sitting there for a second, but it was just generic code to remove duplicate code. That sometimes does something on a vec and array, and sometimes on a vec. So we want the transform. So we kind of want to return that mutatable animation players here. So right now we're kind of like testing to see if the children have a transform that is also got a animation player and a transitions on it. I don't remember why we put without path there. This is where we need the animation transitions is going to be on the animation player. That's just awkward. So we've got our object query. We've got that transform. This transform, I named these the same thing. That's really unfortunate. Let's rename this to like player transform or something. First time you hit a compiler bug? Nice. It's definitely interesting to see like the uptake in terms of people who are newer, sometimes trending to think it's a compiler bug first, then realizing that the compiler doesn't really make that many mistakes for regular code, and you like, unless you're working with things that you know are going to generate compiler bugs, you probably aren't going to hit them. And then later on, the contrast between like, this has got to be a problem with my code, and it turns out to be a compiler bug. Okay, so we've got transform on the object query. Let's call this object transform then. Just to keep this separate from the other. And then it's clear that this is the object transform, not the animation player transform. And I guess we move this inside of the other code. I'm thinking about the implications of that because the transform query oh yeah, path is just differentiation because we used path up here. I don't actually know that that is a problem though. Let's make sure that that is. I feel like without customer NPC would be better. Right, because this is definitely a thing without an NPC. The fact that it doesn't have a path doesn't really matter, I don't think. I think it just matters that it's not part of the object query. And I guess we don't need to call this object query anymore either. We could call this NPC query. Makes the code a little bit clearer. So we've got our NPC query and then just a transforms query. And the transforms have to have the animation player and the animation transitions. So I think this all has to always be true, which means that this will always succeed. So I think we do let here instead, like let else. Then we get to pop this out. NPC should always have a valid transform animation player and animation transitions. And then this goes here because now we have access to it outside of that. And then this really only needs to happen if it's moving to something, right? I guess it could always happen. Really the only thing we need is this mute animation or animation transitions. And then here we need to do animation transitions dot play, and we need the player, we need the new animation to play, which will be, I think 2, if I remember my thing correctly offhand, which I probably don't. We'll make it 0. Well, I guess we can make it like 1 or something. And then this is player. Which means we actually also need player here. We don't need whatchamacallit. We don't need that to be a filter anymore. We need that to be actually around. I don't think it needs to be mutable, but it's possible that it does. I didn't actually check. Looks like I think that's true. I think we do need it to be mutable. Expected unit found active animation. Yeah, types differ in mutability. Yeah, we need it to be mutable. I think the player gets modified by the animation transitions. That doesn't look right. So what is the issue? 2 into duration from seconds. Oh, I forgot a semicolon. And then it needs to be borrowed as mute. So this doesn't, I think if I'm correct, we start playing the walking animation immediately. And then as a result, the NPC will stop here. Right? So they've stopped moving. And then I don't think they're going to pick up moving again. I should really make this little process take like 1 second or something first. Cool, pick it up, walk it back. Yeah, so then they skate along the ground. And you see how their legs weren't actually in the right spot? So that means I think we can just play consistently, right? So whenever we do this, we can just say immediately start running. Not a huge fan of like having these indices all over the place. Not sure what to do about that just yet. Right? Like it would be nice to have these indices be some kind of constant or something instead, so that I knew what I was trying to do. So they go there, they stop after a second. We wait because I've put an exceedingly long wait time on this. We pick it up, bring it back, and then they don't play. Oh, you know what I'm not doing? I'm not repeating. And I think both of these have to repeat. And I don't remember what animation 2 is, but I think we have that over in the game scene, right? So 1, 2 should be idle, so it should be working. Yeah, the enum for sure. Enum makes sense. I just want to create the enum from the code, if that makes sense. Spawn NPC, it walks in, it stops, and now it's just waiting. Cool. That's great for us. Click here. It's what you did to remove hard-coded indices for render layers. Yes. The only difference is that render layers are... Okay, so that is only playing idle. Render layers are hard-coded entirely. And these animation names come from the GLTF. So... I feel like they should be driven from the GLTF. But I also don't know that that's true. I think there's a trade-off here, right? If I create the enum from the GLTF file, that means my code breaks if I don't have an animation that is named the right thing, which is probably a good thing. But on the other hand, the entire rest of the game won't run if the animations aren't correct. And I don't know that that's a good thing. So like kind of trade-offs there. Do I want the compile time correctness, which will then force the game to crash if it's not correct? Or do I want to be able to implement, say, one of these animations without implementing all of the animations if I ever replace this character and still have the game run? I feel like I want both, honestly. I feel like in my production build, I want to hard code that enum. But when I'm developing, I probably want to use strings. I think the compromise would probably be building a string-based map like we have here, like this animation names, and then just using these as the indices, which would mean that there's more opportunity for runtime issues if this index list and it changes ever. So I don't know. I'm like 50-50. If we drive it from the GLTF file, that means the GLTF file has to always be correct. If we drive it from the GLTF file and we create a const enum out of it or something like that, then the GLTF file always has to be correct. And I don't know that we want that coupling. But we can do something like this, which I don't know how we would check to make sure that it was correct. Because if we do the enum, we have to do some kind of asset validation so that when I save things out from Blender, I know when I save it out from Blender whether I've made a mistake or not. Hey, Trevor, how's it going? We're just talking about a little bit about like, so we've got this GLTF file, right? And it has animations in it. And right now what I'm doing is accessing the animations by index. So when we go to play, where was this? Here. When we go to play these animations, which is in NPC, right? Well, didn't mean to paste anything. Play. When we go to play, I have this code that looks like this. And this is fine, except for the fact that there's just a random number 3 here. And a random number 3 is like, what does 3 mean? We do have like a list of the animations, but that's just because I brought it in manually. So like theoretically, I could access the index from here. And we were just having a conversation around like this list could be driven by the GLTF file, but if it's driven statically with an enum, that means the game crashes if it isn't correct, which is beneficial in certain respects. But if I ever want to make changes to this list, that means the GLTF file has to be correct, which then means that I also am committing to like implementing validation for the things that I'm saving out of Blender. Because I want to know when I save it out of Blender if it's correct or not. The other option is to just generate this list or hard code this list. So the hard coded list is right here. We could just use this. I think that's the best trade-off at the moment, honestly. I think I'm going to do that. So we're opening ourselves up to some runtime issues. The runtime issues already exist because we're choosing indices. But I think it's a little bit more flexible. So let me pull this. Let me pull this over. I think I put this in NPCs. Like customer NPC animation names, which is probably because it's const, it has to be uppercase, right? Yeah, so the worst is that it picks the wrong index, right? But if we do... So if we do a const driven by the GLTF file, right? If we do an enum driven by the GLTF file, then at the very least, all of the animations have to be there. And if they're all there, then they will all be ordered correctly because it is being defined by the program that's exporting the animations, right? So when we export from, say, Blender or whatever, that will create the list and at the same time effectively create the enum. So it will always be in sync. So the indices won't be wrong ever, just via the fact that that logic will have to be correct. So theoretically, we could mess up that logic, yes. The downside of that is like if we removed emote yes and we were using emote yes in the game would crash when we went to load that new asset. And we're not necessarily working on the animation at the same time that that asset gets updated. So I don't know that a game crash is the right failure mode, especially for development. I think it's the right failure mode for production when you build the binary. I don't know that it's the right failure mode for development when you might be changing a bunch of stuff, right? Like I feel like there's two levels of validation here. One of them is like, I'm not working on this right now and I don't want it to break my program. And the other one is when I ship this to production and I create the game and ship it to people, I want to make sure that we're using all the things that we think we are. So, yeah, I don't know. Interesting thought. I don't know if there's a way to have two different ways of doing it, you know? Like maybe we do string keys and then there's some like computed generated file that starts out as not an enum and then is an enum later or something. I don't know. I don't know. Interesting thing to think about though. What is the underscore screaming snake case? So for now, we're going to do a trade-off where we do a hard-coded list so we know which ones we expect to have. And then at least when we're reading the code, it'll be easy to determine which one it's supposed to be. And I think for now, that's the right trade-off. I am very interested actually in getting this to be like dev time flexible and production time build breaking. I think that's a really good idea. And you could say, yeah, well, just don't use assets that aren't that aren't correct. But I think things get out of sync when you're doing development all the time, and sometimes intentionally. So transforms without. Where's our play? Our play is here. What is on today's episode? Today on, I don't know what we're calling this stream. We're finishing up the animation work from last week. Let's see. What was the third one? This is like walking or something. Walk. We just had a conversation around static versus dynamic, like indices for animation playing, and whether they should be driven by the GLTF file or not. So really, we want this to be. I guess this can be an enum, right? Since we're hard coding it. So let's grab all of this. Get rid of these. We will select it all. Snake case it. Nope. Uppercase it. How do I turn those dashes into underscores? Who knows? I guess I'll do it manually. So this is an enum now. Customer names. And then the only other problem is that all of these need to be labeled now. Yeah, I've seen you around in the Bevy Discord helping people out, Hukase. That's really nice. Why is this yellow? Do I do anything else besides YouTube and courses? Yes. I eat and sleep. No, I do some independent consulting on the side. YouTube doesn't really make enough money to support much of anything, honestly. The workshops and stuff make me more money, but it's not enough to replace like a software engineering, like consulting, independent contractor salary. So I do other stuff as well. I'm relatively a fairly small YouTube channel, all things considered. There's only like 30,000 subscribers on the channel. Lower, upper. Oh, right, because these aren't supposed to be this, right? What am I supposed to do here? My brain is blanking. Just gonna look it up. Regular caps. I guess we'll do what? Camel case and then, whoa, did that just delete everything? Okay. Unfortunately, I have to do this on every line. Okay, here we go. That was weird. I swear, some of the keyboard shortcuts in VS Code are wild. I'm pretty sure that just sent me to like a completely different file. And can I get rid of this one? Cool. That did great. That was wonderful, VS Code. That is exactly what I wanted. I think we have to lowercase it, and now we have to camel case it. And now that's not camel case though. I don't understand. I don't understand VS Code's choices here, because that's camel case. But why weren't the other ones camel case? It just capitalized everything. Oh well, don't care. Not worrying about it. Isn't this title case? This is title case. Camel case starts with a lower first letter. Oh, do people call title case camel case? Interesting. Do we dare click on some random link? Where is it? Okay. That's so weird. I guess title case is written title case. Okay, so Pascal case is upper camel case, but so is camel case with a capital C. I'm very confused. I like this is one of those situations in which you realize that a bunch of people have been referring to something that you think is one definition and it actually has both definitions. I think it does mean both, depending on whether you capitalize the C or not, which is very confusing in an internet-centric world because nobody capitalizes anything. Well, today we learned. Sorry to have ruined everybody's day with that. But it gets worse, right? It gets worse because when I did the conversion from a lowercase, full lowercase, to camel cased, it uppercased the first word, the first letter here, and then it didn't uppercase the first letter here. So it chose to capital C camel case here and lowercase camel case here. I think people are lax about being correct. Definitely. Definitely. Also, that's just how English works, you know? Like, to some extent, what you mean is what it means and not what you're actually saying. I do try to be precise with my language, but sometimes there just is no precision to be had. Imagine it's a 50-50 chance. Like they're doing RNG dot fucking 0 to 1 and it either does all cap or no cap. Oh, that would be awful. Move customer. Okay, so then this should be oh, this is also the wrong. Okay. See what it does this time. Lowercase that time. I do really like that it gives us a whatchamacallit. It gives us a full autocomplete list. So like it's very clear that this is named walk and not walks or walking or whatever. Random case. I do want transform to Pascal case. I don't. Whoop. What is going on here? What did I just do? Oh, this isn't even the right file. It did that file flip up again. Anyway. Oh, it does have Pascal case. Nice. I don't know why I didn't see that earlier. In any case, I want to impl on this, I think. I think I want to impl because I'm blanking on the name of what the index is called, the discriminant. I don't think I want to label all of these individually. Well, I don't know. Because they're only indexed for the use case that we're using them for, right? Does VS Code have a insert incrementing number function? Damn. It was so close. Because these all have to start at 1. I don't really want to type them all out. And they only have to start at 1 for... You couldn't find one when you tried. It's, you know, I do VS Code because it makes sense to do VS Code for streams and stuff. Because at the very least, it's the least common denominator, right? A bunch of people use VS Code. If I use VS Code, that means that I'm doing something that is not like horribly confusing for people who are watching. Like it's easier to follow me when I'm in VS Code and doing this rather than like in Emacs or something, or like Vim or whatever. This could have been like an off-screen whatever, and I would have just hit the numbers or hit the right characters, and the numbers would just be there, and then nobody would have seen me actually type them in. Obviously, for something like 100 items, it would have been more of an issue, but NeoVim doesn't have multiple cursors? That seems wild. Oh, so you're telling me I should actually not be typing these? That makes more sense. I don't customize the discriminant too often. So in that case, this is like as U8 or something, or as, what is it, usize is the argument. I guess this isn't as anything. This is supposed to be a node index. So let's do dot node index on that, and then we'll impl this. I guess we are finally pulling in pet graph because we'll need the node index type. I don't think you need rep or U8 for that, but maybe. Oh, impl from. Yeah, let's impl from. I think you're right. And then node index is not going to be available anywhere. So we actually do have to pull in pet graph, which I'm not like super happy about that. I feel like Bevy should be re-exporting pet graph for this. But maybe not. Yeah, they definitely don't. So we have to pick a pet graph, and we have to pick a pet graph that's like compatible. So I'm just going to assume that 0.6.5 is compatible. But we can check. Dependencies. That doesn't look, that's not the full list of dependencies. Crates. Bevy internal. Cargo. I actually don't know which package pulls in pet graph. Maybe it's Bevy animation. Yeah. NeoVim and Emacs and Vim and all of those have increment all these numbers operators for sure. In Vim, you can add to the beginning or end of selected lines, but I never saw a multi-cursor. It's interesting that it doesn't have multi-cursor. I would have expected it to. Dependencies of dependencies of dependencies of dependencies. Bevy reflect. That's a macro, so I don't think it needs it. Feature pet graph. Let's check Bevy reflect for pet graph. Zero 0.6. I'm just going to specify it in the same way that Bevy does. Bevy Velo had a release. Ooh, which one do we use? I think it's Graph. Oh, I guess we could use animation node index. That's what we should be doing, right? This should be for this. And this is U32. And then this should be, and then we don't have to specify pet graph. I'm trying to avoid specifying pet graph in my cargo toml because I really am not planning on manually using it at the moment anyway. So I would love to not specify like a transitive dependency of a crate just because we're trying to use one of the types. So this should not work, right? Into. Cargo tree less and search for pet graph. Yeah, could do that. You don't need to search for it though. I'll show you in a second. Crates.io has listed dependencies and dependents. So cargo tree dash I pet graph would show us the version that we have installed and what crates that it is required by, which is, wow, that's a lot. So at the very top, we see petgraph 065, and it gets pulled in through Bevy animation, through this chain of stuff. This is a reverse dependency lookup, effectively. It's a little awkward because I'm using some main branches and they get kind of long. But you can see there's only one version of petgraph in the dependency tree. And you can see everything that requires it. So that's cargo tree-I petgraph. This is really relevant if you are doing like pre-release Bevy stuff and you're trying to do some patches or some overrides or stuff and you're seeing some weird trait errors or something. You might have multiple versions of Bevy in your dependency graph. So you could do cargo tree-I Bevy and see what versions of Bevy you have here. It'll actually warn you if you have conflicting versions, or not conflicting versions. It'll warn you if you have multiple versions because it can't do the lookup for a specific version without you telling it which one you want. So if theoretically we had 0.13 and 0.14 in this project at the same time, or 14 and 15, right? That's the next release. If we were doing pre-release stuff, you would be able to figure out if you have any like lingering 0.14 dependencies, and it would tell you, instead of dumping this list, it'll dump hey, you have 0.14.1 and 0.15-dev or something like that. You need to tell me which one you want to use. So reverse dependency is great. I'm going to leave this commented here because I don't want to go through the process of like rewriting it if I ever want that back. But that looks like it worked. The only downside is like you can still stick whatever you want in here. And I don't like that you can stick any arbitrary index in. I would love to prevent that now that we have this enum. And this will be idle. Very useful. I often have that problem with Bevy and eGUI. Yeah. Yeah, the reverse dependency lookup is a great little trick. Nation. Let's do for play in source and not the Tenua stuff. Of course, that also gets player. So game scene is the other one, which means that it needs to be pub from here, and I don't think I make it pub. So yeah, TLDR, I don't know if I want to generate this list or this enum from the GLTF file. I feel like it would be useful to do, but I almost feel like there needs to be a caching layer of some kind. Like, how do you get back to a working state without having to go into Blender and update the file? And I don't know how you would do that automatically without basically creating generated files that are just these enums, right? Because if you export the GLTF with the animations and this enum is created in a separate generated file, then in the build script, you could probably make sure that these are up to date for the given asset that you have, in which case getting back to a working state would be insert the old asset. But that also means you can't update the asset unless it's perfectly compatible with the new one, or unless you want to do updates. So I'm waffling back and forth on whether that is more useful or less useful. I do like it being well typed. We aren't having mod support or anything, so we don't really need to worry about this being like serializable in that way. But yeah, I don't know. Just some stuff to think about, I feel like. Let's look for play here. And then this needs to be like customer NPC animation names. And this was what, walk into? I forget if it was walk or run. Is this in, no, this is in alphabetical order. That's entirely useless. I mean, it's not entirely useless, but I feel like it would be nice to be able to sort this differently. One, two, three, that is walk. You suppose a map of names to index built when loading the GLTF and printing a warning if an animation is missing. Another one when trying to play a missing animation would work all the time. Yeah, you would have to use... Well, okay, so the thing is going to be when you use this enum in a random place in a source file, if that enum variant doesn't exist, it will fail to compile. So you would have to use strings if you wanted to satisfy that case. And then you would like warn and return a default index, right? At which point you're kind of like deferring all of this to runtime. And I think the implication here is that when I'm doing development, I want it to be deferred to runtime. And when I'm doing production builds, I want it to be compile time. Okay, so let's make sure this works because I've spent a decent amount talking about indexes and camel cases. Cool, so they idle. Yeah, like I want an enum for the developer experience. I want a string for the runtime warning instead of the compile time. So I feel like this needs to turn into that looked good to me. I wasn't really paying attention. Compile time checks on assets is kind of hard. That's something the user can change. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Well, it's compile time checks on generated metadata is what it is. It's not on the asset itself, right? I guess it could, if you only do it via asset, then you wouldn't be able to do an enum. So we would only be able to have an enum if we pre-calculated it, which, to be fair, I feel like most of the assets are going to be preordained. I think it's a trade-off between, do you want to do in-house development and ship builds that you know to a higher degree are safe and ready to go? Or do you want to swap things out at runtime? And I think both are valid answers, which is why I'm kind of like, why it's sticking in my head, you know? Like, I think if you're shipping, let's say, I don't know, a jam game or a game that is not going to be moddable at all, and it's not going to be whatever at all. Or if it's going to be moddable, it has to have all of these animations or it won't work. Then like creating that enum is not going to be really a problem, and it enhances your ability to make sure that your game is working the way you think it is when you ship it. But if you want things to be more dynamic, if you want people to be able to like change this list of animations and mod out different strings to be able to like access different NLA tracks in your GLTF export or whatever, I think they have to be strings or indices at least. Isn't Bevy for Rust? Yes. Bevy is built in Rust. My AC turned off. Okay, so this is like working, I'm going to call this, for the NPCs for the moment. So let me commit this. Is this a serious game or a proof of concept? I just stumbled here while I was on UE5 watching YouTube. This is so my goal is to ship a Steam page, basically. The big gap between being able to actually ship a Steam page for this, and actually, let's run it with the main menu, I guess. Features, or I guess not features, with main menu. I forget what I did for this. Oh, it's underscores. And long loading. So my goal is to build this game up until the point at which it could be a viable Steam page, right? Which means doing very specific things. The biggest gap for this game in particular at the moment is the art. It is not actually, I think, functionality or whatever. It is not really currently intended to be like a full, I guess, serious game is the way that you might call it. I'm working on getting things in the cycle of like 0 to Steam page. And then once I get to that point, I'll decide whether I want to continue with it or not. And if I do want to continue with it, then I'll put the Steam page up and I'll keep working on it. But definitely the biggest gap between what the game is currently and what it needs to be for that to happen is I need to do a bunch of work into the art. And I don't have the time to do that over the next 2 weeks because I have to give a talk in Montreal in like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So it'll look very programmery until that point, at least. I personally would make a top level ROM that refers to a GLTF and has the specifications for how the animation graph and other stuff. Yeah, a ROM file would work. We did try the ROM file for the animation graph here. All these clips are referring to a GLTF file in the animation graph. But that's not really the problem, I don't think. Okay, so we've got our animations for the player. I think we're using player dot. So here's the interesting part, I think. Bevy Tenua wants to have these extra functions that are like seek by all and stuff like that. And I don't know that those exist on like animation transitions, for example, right? So we've got play, right? And if we're using animation transitions, is Bevy ready yet for such games, or is it still in early stages for small projects? Not familiar with what's possible. Can it work with networking, multiplayer, replication, etc., or no? You asked because you've been looking for a solid engine for your team to switch to. Recently, the best engine and our best option you found so far is Range Engine. What is Range Engine? Light and powerful game engine and 3D software. You can make models, materials, animations, and publish games. Are you artist focused? Like, is the majority of your team artists, or are they programmers, or like what's the makeup of your team? I think that's really the question, honestly. Bevy, there are games shipping with Bevy currently. but there's no editor for Bevy currently, right? So if you're expecting like a Godot-like experience, like this seems to have, I can't open this photo, unfortunately. Oh, that's Blender. That's not interesting. Are they rendering inside of Blender for the engine? Because that's not an in-game editor. That is Blender's UI. It's Blender Game Engine Modern Mod. So this is basically like the Blender game engine if it was around today still. I think, yeah. So anyway, to answer your question, Bevy is ready for many things. It really depends on your team makeup and what your goals are. It is totally capable of shipping production games. There are people shipping production games with it. If you are majority artist, like a majority artist team, you are going to have to find a workflow that works for you. And I would do that first. I would try to make sure that you can support your artists if you wanted to use Bevy. You'll end up using, if you're going to use like something like Blender, right? You're going to end up using blenvy most likely, or you're going to be ending up like shipping GLTF files. So it really depends. If none of you know Rust, that is also going to be another point against Bevy probably, unless you want to spend a bunch of time learning Rust. It sounds like y'all have experience with JavaScript, so it's not terribly different from JavaScript. But if you don't know Rust at all, yeah, you know, yeah, for artists, the lack of tools might be an issue. Bevy is very, very, very good if you have programmers to program stuff for it. If you have a majority artist team, I think some of the workflows are probably lacking, but the engine stability is not the issue, right? Like the engine being production ready is not really the issue in terms of like whether you choose it or not. I would say it might fit, but you have to figure out whether it fits your team or not, right? I think probably if you're looking at something like Range Engine, it might be not what you want. It very well could be, but it really depends. How would I recommend learning Rust? I would start with some open source stuff. There is Rustlings and the Rust book. They're two things that go pretty well together. Not everybody likes the Rust book. Not everybody likes Rustlings. If you have a basic understanding of Rust, that's probably enough for Bevy, honestly. Bevy is like very, very, very good at, how do I phrase this? If you look at the examples, you don't run into that many ownership issues. You don't run into the need to build a lot of architecture from scratch. And that's probably the most common like new Rust user mistake that I see making. So like if you look at all the examples and stuff, like Bevy examples, you'll see a bunch of functions. They'll have fairly small contents. You don't have one monolithic game loop or anything. Oh yeah, if you posted a link, it gets eaten by YouTube. I don't control that actually. So yeah. Unfortunately, no links. But yeah, I would say a basic understanding of Rust is probably enough for Bevy. You don't need to work with unsafe. You don't need to do really advanced stuff in general. Yeah, sorry about the links. It is YouTube eats them automatically. I'm not modeling them out or anything. But anyway, yeah, I think Bevy is production ready in the sense that people are building production games in it. And really what it has to be is, does it match your team and your use case? And that's a question only you can really answer, right? Basic Rust knowledge is probably enough. But it depends on what you're trying to do, right? You can do integration with Blender. There's some workflow stuff around artists getting things into GLTF and getting them into Bevy. You're probably going to have to write some code. But yeah. What is the state of mobile games for Bevy? People are shipping mobile games. The mobile renderer is not the focus, but that's only because nobody has chosen to focus on it, right? I think when it comes to the renderer, I would think that desktop 3D has probably gotten the most work recently. 2D is workable, but it's missing a couple things that people seem to want, like 2D transforms. So you have to deal with the Z index. Not a huge deal, but a little bit of like a DX, you know, paper cut, if you will, if you're really used to 2D stuff. And then Bevy runs on the web just fine. There are some things that you can't do on the web unless you use WebGPU. That is not a Bevy thing. That is just like a WebGL, like web thing. Like WebGL doesn't have compute shaders, so you can't use them on the web unless you use WebGPU. And WebGPU is like Chrome, stable, Firefox, nightly, Safari preview, if I remember correctly. You're using Bevy to learn Rust mostly. If I'd have to ship a game, I'd probably be using Godot. Yeah, that's the other thing. If you're building like a generic 2D platformer or something, like something where you're just going to take some assets, throw them in, and it's going to be very basic, regular, like controls and stuff. And the thing that makes your game different than other games is the art. You know, you might choose Godot instead. Is it possible to call C++ DLLs from Rust with debugging support? Some algorithms, such as pathfinding, are a pain to write in Rust because of the borrow checker. There are a number of pathfinding crates in Rust. One of them is literally called pathfinding. To answer your question, I don't know if it's possible to use a debugger through the DLL into C. I'm not a huge debugger person, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. Yeah, Xavier, C, yes, C++ requires a C API first. Okay. But like, it's fully possible to write pathfinding algorithms in Rust. So there's the pathfinding crate here that you can see, and then there's also PetGraph, which actually Bevy uses under the hood. PetGraph has a number of different, you know, minimum whatevers and things. So yeah, I think my opinion on if Bevy is production ready is if you're doing something that is like, it doesn't really require any code at all, or it doesn't really require any special like logic or any rendering modifications or anything like that. If you're doing something that's like bog standard and really differentiated because of the art and not because of any of the functionality or controls or rendering or anything like that, then I would say maybe Godot is a better choice, or something that's more established is a better choice. If you need to do anything custom, Bevy is a great choice because it really, really allows you to do a lot of custom stuff in an extensible way. If you need to implement anything for rendering that's custom, you can totally do that all the way down to like raw WGPU APIs, and it works across platforms, and it's great. And then the other thing that I would mention is like team composition. If Bevy fits your team, great. If it doesn't fit your team, like if you're all artists, you're probably going to have a hard time with Bevy because Bevy doesn't have an editor. You'll need to use something like Blender for doing art. You'll need to use something like LDTK or Tiled if you're doing 2D, tile-based stuff. So it really depends. All right, I tried writing pathfinding in Rust and it was a pain. Sometimes better to write stuff from scratch instead of using libraries. I think that it's better to use libraries that exist. I don't agree. So for educational purposes, if you're trying to learn something, totally go write it yourself. I think that if you are trying to get something done, probably using a crate is the better move. Because why would you rewrite something that already exists, right? It's the same idea, like if you're trying to actually ship a game, why would you spend a bunch of time rewriting pathfinding algorithms when pathfinding algorithms already exist? You know? It's kind of like, do I spend a few hours doing this and then debugging it later? Or do I use something that already is written and works? So I think it has potential for educational purposes, but I think one of the strengths of Rust is actually in cargo and in the ecosystem. Depends how much control you want. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to write something simple that doesn't need many features, it's going to be like one pathfinding function, something like that. Or if you needed custom pathfinding, yeah. If you're saying, hey, I need something custom, definitely write it. No argument against that at all. And even all those editors tools would require writing some code. Yeah, if you were just an artist team, Bevy probably is not for you today. There's a lot of thought going into, hey, we need to support artists way better. There's a lot of thought going into building an editor, building a remote protocol, working towards those asset workflows in the future. That's why Assets v2 exists at all. But it's not for full artist teams today. You don't like adding dependencies that are not somewhat officially supported. Yeah, I think so. I come from a very, we'll say, JavaScript school of thought at the moment. In my mind, if I add a dependency, I am comfortable taking it over. Right? And that's my line, personally. If I add a dependency into my project, I am ready to take that over if it becomes unmaintained. I understand that that's not possible for everybody or not wanted for everybody. But that has served me very well over a number of years. Especially like JavaScript is absolute turmoil when it comes to packages. You should totally make a small game engine or framework and work on a series. That would be cool. I'd say make a framework for a specific game from scratch, no libs. I don't really think building an engine is a useful exercise. Like educationally, absolutely, right? There is definitely WGPU, like raw WGPU stuff that I'm working on. I linked it to somebody earlier today, actually. It's not really ready for public consumption, but it is technically available. So this is like raw WGPU stuff using Winit and just WGPU. The goal of this is not to build an engine, though. The goal of this is to build it up so that you have a baseline for understanding how Bevy works. Right? I don't really want to build an engine. I would rather upskill people into understanding and working with Bevy because that'll serve people better, right? It doesn't really serve my, say, YouTube audience, for example, for me to build a custom engine and then nobody else be able to use it. Like there's some educational like value in that, but it's far more valuable if I do something like this, which takes WGPU and Winit and starts at 0 and builds it up into like a pseudo Bevy. Then you can actually understand what's happening in Bevy's renderer and go use a production grade engine rather than my little thing that I spent 6 months on YouTube building, you know? It's also worth looking into a crate before adding it. Recently saw a crate that added just 50 lines of code with a single responsibility. Would definitely go over that and copy it. Yeah, I mean, it really depends, right? I think there's value in having socially maintained code, even if it's 50 lines. I also understand that a lot of people are like anti-dependency in kind of like orientation, if that makes sense. I am definitely on the pro dependency side of things. Like I think that community maintained code is more likely to be more useful to more people, and I would rather contribute back to that 50 line, you know, function crate than copy it into my code base and maintain it. Unless you're trying to have Factorio level optimizations, then having more control may pay off. Yeah, I think if you're doing something super specialized, there's total value in potentially writing it yourself. I also think that most people who start off thinking about optimization first tend to not ship things. Unless you have a lot of experience, right? If you have 5 to 10 years of experience in building Factorio level like games, and you know that you're going to need some optimization, go do it. But if you haven't built, let's say if you haven't built like a voxel rendering engine and you're like, I'm going to build Minecraft, you can get really, 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 really lost in the state of the art of voxel rendering without ever shipping a game, right? So I think it's a trade-off, just like anything else. Maybe then make a simple GUI editor for Bevy to show people how to integrate things using something like Noesis imgui. I never know how to pronounce imgui, XML, etc. So Bevy already has eGUI support. Bevy eGUI. Right. And there's things that build on top of this, like Bevy editor, please, if you're looking for editor type stuff, which can do like kind of editor kind of stuff, etc. Like Bevy eGUI is super cool. I use eGUI mostly for debugging purposes. So that would be Bevy Inspector eGUI, which is this little world inspector here. Actually, if we run the game that I'm allegedly supposed to be working on right now, you'll see Bevy eGUI, or Bevy Inspector eGUI right here. And this is every entity in the entire world here. Some of them are unnamed for various reasons. I think these are probably observers. Yeah. Observers tend to not currently have names. It's kind of an issue. I would name them, but and then there's like level 1, which is like the GLTF scene for this entire level. If we spawn in an NPC, you see an entity just spawned. It has some children. We can click through here, see all the children, yada, 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 etc., etc. Simple and editor don't fit well together. That's absolutely true. Editors are vastly complicated things. I'm glad you're enjoying the stream. Just add a name. Yeah, just add a name. Yeah, but then I have to spawn them all manually, and I am just a bit lazy, is what that is. I can totally add a name to those. What multiplayer networking library would I recommend? Ooh, I don't know that I have a recommendation. I think that Lightyear and Replicon are probably the two that I hear the most about. I don't have a strong recommendation. I don't really build multiplayer games. There are people in the Bevy Discord who have significantly more experience. I think one of the subject matter experts actually for Bevy is a networking like expert person. Let's see, Foundation Bevy people. Yeah, so Joy is like really, really good at networking. And they sit around in the networking channel in the Bevy Discord. I would get their advice, or I would get the networking channel's advice in general for a specific game. I think that I am not the right person to ask for which is the best. They're also all getting like significant improvements all the time. Premature optimizations are bad, but designing the foundations in a pessimistic way is also sometimes a brick wall later. Yeah, I think I run into fewer issues when I'm architecting code in Rust than I do in other languages. I feel like in other languages I've had to build up a very long history of like, I built 10 bajillion, you know, X type applications, and now I know how to architect an X type application. But like, yeah, I don't know. Again, premature optimization bad. Doing things terribly also bad. So we've got these bases here. Animation player. So animation player has a whole bunch more functions on it than animation transition. And we're not supposed to touch animation player if we're using animation transitions. So I have a question around what we are supposed to do for things like seek all by. If we're using animation transitions. So for context for people who are new, I moved from using like raw animation player to using this higher level approach using animation transitions. So I went from having like total control over how the animations were running and how they transitioned and everything like that, to having a little bit less manual control, but the code works out a lot nicer. And I think this is the future. I think moving forward, this is going to get more and more support. The animation player will still be around. I'll still be able to use it, but that's what we're dealing with right now. When using an animation transitions component, you should play all animations through the animation transitions play method. So if we do play, we get back an active animation. That active animation has set speed, etc. Seek to active animation. So I think we can replace everything with chained functions on this animation, active animation. So where's our player? Player dot. But I think we'll need to make some changes here. So we have active animation. Playing animations mute. So a active animation, we should be able to get back from the animation transitions, right? Get main animation gives us the node index, which we can probably just pass back into play. Feels a little weird, but very possible. So I think that's good. That's all fine. Oh, look, this is right in the animated fox example. Oh, that's a brand new animation transitions. Okay. So we don't actually have crawling. We don't have running either. So let me do this instead. Warn must must implement implement running crawling speed. So I'm going to start off this little refactor by putting a couple of warnings in for things that I don't really intend to do at the moment. So let's take this and let's move it out here. So when we're running around with our character, we'll get a little warning that says, hey, you forgot to do this. That's controller stuff, so must implement jumping, dashing, seek. And then the animation weights we are going to get rid of entirely. The clip node indices are things that we don't need anymore. So this is player.start animations, standing. I think we can just get rid of this. This player is really what we need. I don't think we need stop all anymore. So let's change our query. Player comes from all the way up here. This is animation players query. We're not going to actually use the animation player, so we're going to change this to an animation transitions. I guess we do need the player too to use the transitions. So animation transitions. Example animation weights is not around anymore, so we're going to delete it. I don't think we're adding it to that location anymore, so that'll be fine. And then I need to scroll back down to our destructuring, which I missed. This is not player and weights. This is player and animation transitions. Which should give us some more errors that we then go fix. So in this case, for node index weight, we don't need these. We're only going to need this play. So previously we were manually updating the weights in our animation graph. Bevy has an animation graph which lets you play multiple animations at the same time. And this is alter for standing. So we're going to do, I guess this is going to be the same. I'm going to use customer NPC animation names, but we're going to want to change that. And this isn't going to be player. We're going to use animation transitions dot play. And then this is player, which needs to be a mutable reference. And duration, I think duration 0 is going to be it. Is duration not imported? Duration is not imported. Wasn't the thing about using animation transitions just for play? I thought it was for everything. When using an animation transitions component, you should play all animations through the animation transitions play method rather than directly manipulating the animation player. Playing animations directly will cause... Okay, so I guess we can set the speed through the player anyway. That's good, because we'll be able to keep that code. I interpreted this as you should interact with this not through the animation player, but through transitions. But I think you're right. I think your reading is correct. So we don't need to stop all. We can just play. Docs being docs again. So we'll play idle with a speed of 1 when we're standing. So that's good. We get rid of this weights again. We're going to get rid of all this code again. And this is running speed. So if that's the case, then we can do... Because I thought if we're going to play... Adjust speeds. What? Let's look at adjust speeds. Animation player, adjust speeds, multiplies the speed. Okay, that's not what we want. We don't want to multiply. Get fields, animation. Playing animations. For animation in this. And let's comment this out for a second. This is already an iterator. We don't need to iterate over it. So we get a node index on the active animation. But the question is, this is an alter, right? Alter means the character animation state has changed, thus we need to start a new animation. Okay, so this is play. All of these are going to be play, not set. So these are all going to be animation transitions because they are effectively the beginning of a new animation. What is speed? F32, set speed. Probably needs a dereference there. And then this will be running. Do we not have run? What is this called? Crouch, die, fall, sprint. Cool. Player animations running, yada yada. Clean up this code a little bit. This is significantly cleaner than the manual animation player that we had. Then we also need jumping. I don't know offhand why speed is 2 on jumping, but that's not a problem for us. It's probably just randomized. Not randomized, but it's probably just like an arbitrary choice. So let's get rid of this and let's do jump. And I'm just going to continually set the speed here. I don't know that we actually need to. Fall. Also, not all of these are applicable for us right now. We're using Tenua or Bevy Tenua as a controller for the character right now. And Bevy Tenua expects certain things to be possible by default. Not all of which are applicable to how we are going to control the character. But for the moment, I'm just going to fill these in because we can. I don't know. What is a good dash? Idle, interact, pick up, sprint, sit, walk. We don't have a dash. We also don't have a control for a dash currently. We never trigger dash. So it really doesn't matter overall. Let's emote yes. Why not? Our dash will be emote yes for the moment. So this is all new animations. Those should all play. And then jumping and dashing can be chained. We want to start a new jump dash animation when one jump dash is chained into another. So this is trying to just seek to 0. So by reading the docs earlier, we think that this is fine. If it doesn't turn out to be fine, we can always modify it. And then for this, we'll do the same. We'll keep this because we're saying that modifying the speed of the animation is the right thing to do through Animation Player, and starting new animations is the right thing to do through transitions. So I think this is playable at this point. Does my controller still work here? See, so we do retain some of that stuff that we talked about. I really didn't implement jump on controller. Let's make sure that we have jump on controller in a second. Where is our controls? Controls. Where are we doing jump? We're doing jump here. We're doing key code space. I don't want key code space. I have leaf wing here, right? Yeah. This, unfortunately, is the default example for leaf wing. I guess I never overrode the default mapping. Don't remember why I didn't do that. D-pad, ability 1. We probably want up, down, left, right. North, south. We want south. So what are we using for south? We'll call that ability 4. I'm 50-50 on jumping in the game, actually. So maybe we keep that as ability 4. We do player, not keyboard pressed, but action state. Pressed, player action. So Leafwing Input Manager is basically your controller input abstraction compared to like just reading out space and inputs and stuff. Leafwing Input Manager is fantastic. It is getting included in Bevy or upstreamed into Bevy at some point, which is wonderful. Okay, so do we have jump? We do have jump. We have jump, and we have the animation for jumping, which is cool. And we have the animation for falling. So we've basically got what, a variable height jump and a fall animation and a running animation. And I think the only issue that I have currently that I want to figure out a solution for is when we are moving, the legs get trapped in a certain position because we don't go back to standing before we go back to idle. Without shadows, it hurts your brain? What do you mean without shadows? Oh, the player shadow? Why don't we have shadows? Because the directional light isn't casting them? We have shadows based on the point lights. Do I have not Shadowcaster on my directional light? Let's go find out what our directional light does. Render layers, camera 2D, depth of field, 3D camera. Yeah, player shadows without the shadow makes me think it. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. So that's camera. Game scene. Directional light. I don't have not Shadowcaster. I thought shadows enabled would be true, but maybe it's false. I also, I think I want to do an environment map. Dreamer Talon was nice enough to link me to this really great information for doing environmental world lighting with maps. And as part of making a video for that, what I'm actually going to do is do an environment map light for this game, which should help out a whole lot in general. Yeah, so there is a directional shadow now. I guess the shadows were off for some reason. It doesn't particularly help because like the directional light shadow is kind of weird. Maybe I need to make that higher in the sky. Where's our world inspector? Directional light. So this is Bevy Inspector eGUI. And directional light, global transform. Let's like way crank this up just for the moment. And let's say not global transform, transform. What do we think? X, Z. I don't think Y is right. I think it's going to be a combination of Z and... Oh, this probably doesn't actually do anything, now that I think about it. There it is. It's a really fast sun cycle. Okay. It feels weird that Z doesn't do anything, but that's fine. Yeah, the main light should probably mimic the sun or a light coming from the ceiling or a window. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like this would be better. I don't know how to translate 18. Is this is radians or something, right? I don't know what value this is. It is kind of hilarious to just see like a sun cycle happening though. Yeah, I think for the isometric projection, we would probably want something a little bit more like that. But also like behind the player, maybe. Does that look better to you, Xavier? Is that worth implementing? I need to figure out what this rotation is actually going to be in terms of transform. What is the right way to do a directional light move? Yeah, you fixed my brain. Thanks. I'd actually do really appreciate when you point things out like that, because if I'm actually going to ship this game to people, people are going to have the same reactions that you're having as we're developing, right? So it's better to just get those out of the way early rather than shipping it to people and having them go, I can't play this. This is terrible. So where's the directional light? I think I removed the ambient light too, if I remember correctly. Maybe we should put that back into. Point light, children, spotlight, blue light, directional light, shadows enabled true, overcast. And then we just need to do something like this. And then we can also, I'm going to steal the shadow config as well. Because I don't know that we qualify as having a large scene. And if we don't have a large scene, then we can focus more of the resolution and get better shadow quality. But I don't offhand know what is considered a large scene for that purpose. So we'll see. Or maybe we won't boost the shadow config at the moment. I think I put this in the wrong. From rotation X, negative pi over 4. That was very interesting. Let's run that and let's mess around with it a little bit in the world inspector. So directional light. And then transform, not global transform, transform we probably want something a little bit more like that, right? That's like way high though. So this is 1, 2. What are my radian rotations? Pi is 3.14, so I think it was closer to 6, right? So 6.28 would be over there. So 6-ish seems okay. I think that, so roughly a little bit less than 2 pi. I think I'm going to get rid of the shadow config until we can deal with it later. And then I don't really want it to be that stark. Like this seems better, like a 5.6-ish, 6.28. Yeah, tau is probably the same as 0, yeah. So in that case, it would be what, negative, what did we have, 5.2, 0.8? So 3.14 to 0.8 is, God, I'm really bad at radian math. I think this is roughly what we want though. I'm going to get rid of the shadow config and target a, it's really interesting that they also don't use the constants in that example, because there's a frac pi 4, right? I guess it's not really that important. Frac pi 8 is, I think, the lowest that we get to work with. And then I'm going to deal with the shadow config later. Shadows are looking great, but you're not an artist. We went from 0 shadows to having shadows at all. So, you know, the bare minimum versus what they could be. I think we'll go with this for the moment. I would love to look at, then we actually get the little shadows. I would love to check to see what the shadows are like in other games like this. I don't know that I want to search for Hades 1 on stream. Okay, we're good. Searching images always makes me a little bit nervous. Hades on Steam. So we can just go to their Steam page. So the shadows are directly under. Actually, shadows are -x / directly under. I think those are art created shadows. I don't think those are actually light driven. Which would make sense because this is all 2D art. It's effectively like 3D rendered out to 2D sprite sheets. And I think that the shadow looks like it might be drawn as part of that. Because whenever they're standing still, except here it looks a little back. And then what? Animal Crossing. I don't know, Animal Crossing. And then the shadows in Animal Crossing, not an isometric game, are, I guess, away from camera is what we'll call that. It's beautiful. The shadows. What's another cozy game? Cozy games. Images. What does Cult of the Lamb do? Cult of the Lamb doesn't have shadows, it looks like. Or at least the shadows are... maybe lit from the center? That's interesting. This is roughly -X. I bet this looks like it's sun driven though. That's also a possibility. We could do like a day-night cycle, which would change the shadows based on which window it was coming in from. Which would also be a really nice way to like integrate volumetric lighting. We have volumetric lighting on, wow. Cool. Yeah. Nothing to see there. Nothing to see there. I don't just find my own videos. Oh, right. Volumetric lighting is broken on WebGL. Google knows what I want to see, and or I'm the only person talking about volumetric lighting in Bevy. Let's go to the release notes. They have an image. Not assets. What am I doing? News. Wait, when was the 4th? That's the 10th. Okay. I need to get my need to get my personal site redeployed before the 10th so that I can write my 4th birthday post for Bevy. Is it? I don't think I have it running right now, but okay. So, oh, it's actually right there. I think this is volumetric lighting, or volumetric fog. Sorry. I think there's another example in here though. So this is without volumetric fog and volumetric lighting, and this is with. And it would be very cool to have windows in the, you know, well, I don't know, what do we call this? Building. I'll call it a building. Windows in the building have light shafts coming through when it's like early morning or late at night. I think that would be very cool. And I think that'll give a nice point to do some artistic work. Like the morning will have a certain color to it, and the lights will inside of the building will get a little bit less relevant as it gets to like daytime. And then as it gets back to nighttime, the lights will get more important. And I think that'll give us a little bit of a nice point to do some artwork. Not like artwork in the sense of like drawing, but artwork in the sense of like light painting, if that makes sense. We can also do, what do we call this? Like pre-rendered lighting. There's light probes in Bevy. So we could make use of the light mapper. Which is GI light maps. I hope this has a little bit more than just that image. But they allow you to do some pre-baked lighting for different things. So this is not dynamic, but it could be very cool to get into. So with that in mind, do we have our shadows in the right place? Because I think we want our shadows to go backwards a little bit, right? I guess like it doesn't really matter. Wow, that looks like a big room when it's like that. I think I have it set to vertical sizing at the moment. Oh, nice. Easier than fake light bouncing off of surfaces with multiple. Yeah, it's easier than setting up like a whole bunch of lights and then dealing with the like, I don't know, potential performance ramifications of setting up a whole bunch of lights. Setting up lighting is going to be like a big, it's going to be a big improvement for the way that the whole game looks, right? Like right now we're kind of just gray boxing stuff out. Like these little platforms and stuff aren't going to be there in the actual game. Volumetric fog totally kills performance on your integrated Intel card. It's the only thing that you've seen that requires you to run Bevy examples on the NVIDIA card. Interesting. Interesting. I guess we'll have to keep that in mind. I think if we do volumetric lighting, there will be a settings box, right? It'll be like, turn volumetric lighting off. Which is really easy to implement. If the checkbox is off, just don't add the components, which is really nice. And then just make sure that it like looks fine without the volumetric lighting. But I think there's going to be, similar to the way that other games work, there's going to be some level of like, I want to put some work in to make it look nice if you have the right hardware. And if you want to run it at a faster frame rate or whatever, or like you want to run it on lower end hardware, the option to turn some of that stuff off. But the default should be like a well done artistic rendering of a bunch of different light sources and volumetric and stuff like that. So I think we actually want the shadows to be the other direction, right? Even that blue cube looks better with the directional light in the right place. And now it's just more clear that the character is actually floating a little bit over the... I should implement a debug camera as well, now that I think about it. The Last of Us is an amazing looking game. Absolutely incredible looking game. So the rotation needs to be... what? Frac pi 2 plus frac pi 8? To get it to go to the other side? Because if it's over here and it's up a little bit, then what we really want is 180 degrees up the other way. 1.9. Frac pi to 3.14 is 1.6. I clicked on some of the old spawns. I forgot I still had this in. um, can I do math in this? 3.14 over 8? No, I can't. 3.14 over 8 is 0.4. So we had it at negative 0.4 before. So that's below edge. This is above edge. So 1.6 be 2. Does 2 look right? I think we want the shadows to be this direction. Looking at the other games, maybe a little bit more directly down. So 1.98. Like we want shadows, but we don't want them to be like elongated, super long shadows. We want them to be more like drop shadows on a button, is what I'm thinking. So I think we'll go with negative 1.7. What is negative 1.7? I don't know. It's negative 1.7 though. Cool. And then we have this kind of like slightly nicer looking stuff. I don't know entirely about this. Maybe the ambient light needs to come up a little bit. I don't think we have an ambient light in the scene right now. And then all of this work is going to happen again when I do the environment map light. Is orange red the right color for that? I don't even know. I guess it depends on the time of day and stuff, right? Looks great. Shadows are definitely... It's nice to not have to implement shadows, to just let them be there. Ambient light is not... Does that say insert? That's why. I think we insert ambient light here. I don't know if that's the right place to put it, but it's kind of like this game scene is kind of just like my generic game scene, you know? We can always move stuff out. So the ambient light resource then we can make everything look like it's a flaming hot area of Hades. Yeah, 0.2 is what it says here, and that strikes me as odd. Right? I feel like this didn't get touched when they did the lighting recalibration. Yeah. This value didn't get touched in the lighting recalibration. Because where is the lighting recalibration numbers? Point light intensity. Yeah. So there was a whole lighting recalibration that happened in, I think, 0.14, 13? 14. And I guess that one just got missed. 13 and 14, yeah. So probably worth taking a note that this needs to get updated. Copy that out. Drop it into my notes or whatever. Stream notes. This is also one of the nice things about stream is that, like, I'll pull stuff out of the examples. It'll be wrong. I'll go make a PR for it later, et cetera, et cetera. Had to change it to 420. We are a 420 friendly stream here. I don't really love having so much orange in the scene though, so is 420 enough? Actually 420 is not a bad number. I'm actually going to use that, not even as a joke. It does definitely give it like an orange tint that looks a little bit like it would fit in the morning more than it would fit during the whole day. But we can always change that. We do just need a value. We don't need it to be the right value. The other thing is that it feels like the scale between either the character and the walls and stuff is off, or I don't know. TBD. Can I put an HDRI into the environment? Yes. I was talking about doing that earlier. So basically, instead of the ambient light and whatever, at some point I'm going to do an environment light or an environment map and the lighting from that environment map. I was just talking about that earlier. And then I'm going to probably do a video based on that. The only thing is I don't really have that much time for the next week or two, because I need to make sure that I'm ready to give my talk is the way that I'll frame it. And I start, for whatever reason, anytime I give a talk, I start getting anxiety like 2 weeks out from the talk. So dealing with a little bit of that anxiety, even though I've given a ton of talks over the years. There's really no there's no real reason for me to be feeling like that, but I do. I feel like I'm seeing a little bit of a slowdown there. Let's do a release build. Nice, it's all gravy. Yeah, I've got, man, if you could see the list of videos that I have to produce, it's massive. I'm halfway through doing the workshops and I'm not halfway, but I have I have videos planned out through the end of the year. Let's put it that way. Like I'm already working on a Bevy zero dot, or not a Bevy zero dot, a Bevy like end of year video. It's wild. The required component stuff merged too. So required components, I really want to get a video out for that this week. I don't know if I'm going to have time. But required components is going out with the This Week in Bevy stuff for Monday, which is very cool. I think that there isn't necessarily consensus on what should and shouldn't be a required component. But the fundamental idea is you have struct button. It requires node and UI image. Then you just add button here. And it has to have node and UI image, like invariant level. And then you get to also add style if you want it and stuff like that. So I think that required components is going to end up being another invariant level thing, similar to hooks. So you're going to use it for things that your component has to have. And probably when people are working on their own games, they'll use it for things that are nice to have as well. But if you're building a library, it's only for things that have to be there for the component to operate. But this is very exciting. This is part of the like scene work. Oh, I haven't done a release build in a while. This is part of the scene work. And the scene/UI working group. This is stuff that will eventually build into the editor, which is very exciting. But I'll get a whole summary on this. There's a bunch of interesting implications too. Like if one component has requires and then another one also requires that one, which one gets used? There's so much conversation happening around these. And then there's another thing that's going to come up called constructs that I'm not even going to talk about. But Bevy is very exciting at the moment. I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot of this stuff land. Full rebuild takes a couple minutes. It's not too bad though. Okay, so I wanted to see. I am. I feel like specific directional lights affect the performance. Maybe it's not specific directional lights. Maybe it's the shadow config. Ooh, 1,000? That's huge. Okay, that's the bounds. That's not what I wanted. UE5 is taking 45 to an hour. Oh man, that's rough. Shadow map texture default size is huge. Yeah, I wanted to avoid customizing it, but I don't know that we can for the current scene. It doesn't have an issue until, so this is on 4K currently. It's not an issue until it plays at 4K. When it's lower like this, something more like 1080, it's fine. Absolutely fine. Shadow. What did you call it? Shadow map. And the default here is 2048. It's interesting. It's interesting that that doesn't have an impact when the screen is smaller, but it does have an impact when the screen is bigger. Because this is just a texture, right? It's not. I have point lights. I definitely have point lights. The point lights I don't think are the issue. I could turn shadows off for the point lights. That might be nice. Because right now, if we run the game, so these are point lights, but that's irrelevant because they're not going to be end game. When we spawn an NPC and it goes over, this is a point light, which shouldn't really have an effect because it's like a point light, you know? But I wonder if I should turn the shadows off for point lights. And only turn them on for specific point lights. Because it is a little bit weird to get like horizontal light shadows. You know? I feel like that's going to be one of the answers. I think the point lights are probably not going to be shadow casting. And then we'll rely on the directional light for those shadows. But overall, I'm not going to consider that an issue at the moment anyway. We're going to change that again, like I said, to do environmental maps. So yeah, overall, I think that this is pretty decent at the moment. We are going to have to change that depth of field. That depth of field is pretty intense. So we do this. I don't know how I'm going to support controller for the virtual grid. I don't know if I'm going to support controller for the virtual grid. That's a great question. Yeah, I think it is a little awkward to see like the shadows on the front of this. Right, we were looking at the Hades shadows, and the Hades hashes, Hades 1 Steam page. I don't think that there's anything in the scene that casts shadows other than the directional light. And the vast majority of things in general, like the walls and stuff, don't really cast shadows at all. And then we were looking at Animal Crossing, right? And Animal Crossing has basically the same thing, where the shadows are... they're on more things, but they're facing away from camera. So I think we have roughly two approaches here, right? Either the shadows face away from the camera and then we apply them to more things, or we only apply shadows to like the player and NPCs and stuff like that. And then we take the shadows away from things like the building sides and stuff like that. Which, if we're going to move the directional light and we're going to have backing walls and volumetric lighting, that's probably what we're going to have to do anyway. But we'll see. I don't know yet. There's a lot to do on the art side of things, and I'm kind of considering lighting as part of the art stuff. So I'm not really planning on doing that until a couple weeks from now. We have, I think, one more stream before I go to Canada. And then I'll miss the next stream because I'll be in Canada flying back. And then I'll be free of time. Like I'll have time to do more stuff. So I'll try to get some more artwork in, because I've got to make some decisions around how to do this. Is clicking on these things like fun, you know? Because the idea here is that we're going to have a bunch of NPCs randomly spawning throughout the day. So there is a built-in kind of like day cycle, right? The same way that a lot of cozy games have like a 10-minute day cycle. I'm trying to not increase scope too much. So I think we'll have customers come in throughout the day. I'm going to start out with just randomizing it. Maybe that's what we work on next. Basically, the customers have to come in at some point. I guess they're all going to stand on this plate for the moment. I guess they should just mill around until they are available, right? So that's a question. How do we get them to go into random places? Is there a line? I don't think. I think having them kind of walk around the entryway is more interesting. I wonder if popping up something on their head if they have stuff is like, how do you tell an NPC has stuff to give, right? How do you know that you need to come over here and keep, I guess there's always going to be somebody standing here waiting no matter what. So let's do some kind of cycle where it keeps spawning in. So let's start with spawning out, because that's going to be shorter and easier. So customer NPCs are going to move, right? They're going to move to objectives. The way that we spawn them in is kind of arbitrarily on an entry mesh. And this sends them back to the exit. That's the other thing. We need to do a state machine for the players. Or not for the players, the NPCs. Because if we don't have a state machine for the NPCs, then they're not going to have much of a behavior. Night, Roberto. So we have entity, customer entity, object to the exit, insert path. And then I guess we do like leaving as a component. Items, extend. So this needs to be a component that we have here. That's not how you write that. Derived component, struct leaving. This is going to be pub because we're going to access it somewhere else. And then we are going to do move customer. Move customer needs to know whether they are leaving or not. So we'll do a query for leaving components. We already have the entity for the customer, right? This is a query for the transforms. This has our entity. This is the entity we need. If the entity has reached its target, then we despawn it. Right? If let's see, if leaving.get entity is some else idle. Is okay is probably right. If the entity exists in the leaving query, then commands.entity entity.despawn recursive. So this should handle when a customer NPC gets to its final location and it has a leaving component on it, it leaves. Hey Miner, how's it going? Yeah, we've been going for 3 hours now. I thought it was going to be a short stream today, but I think that 4 hours is really my limit, even when I'm not feeling up to it. I think I can still do 4 hours, which is wild. So we spawn an NPC. Let's get a little machine in here. The other thing is I want to do morph targets for these machines. Like we're using blue cubes as stand-ins for blocking out right now. But this is going to be like a whole upgrade mechanic, right? You're going to be able to buy a new machine and then place it in the world. Cool. And now they leave. So if we imagine this as the front entrance, that customer has now left the building. And then another one comes in. You take it, you bring it over here, you do this. I think when you put stuff in here, you're going to have to do a little Among Us task. And I think that's really going to be the game. It's going to be like, you have to put the things in the right spots. When you put things in the right spots, you're going to have to do little like Among Us level tasks and then run it back. So I don't know that you're even going to want to click on these. I think you are. Right? I think the controls being like WASD, which I don't have bound right now. And then clicking on this pops up a menu. Maybe you do a little thing and then it goes away and this goes into like work mode and then it's done at some point and you take it out and then bring it back. So let's get, I think we get a random amount of customers coming in and out, right? I think that's the next thing to do. Thought it will be like dinner dash or diner dash, different orders for different machines. Yes. I believe there will be different machines. I am very cautious about adding scope at the moment. I want it to be I want it to be something that looks good and functions with a small set of functionality before I expand. I would like it to have multiple different kinds of machines. I would love to have some kind of upgrade tree for those machines, right? So maybe you've got, like a hand washing station to start with, and maybe you upgrade to a washing machine, and maybe you upgrade to um, like a washer dryer instead of the drying line that you had outside, or, like that kind of vibe. Maybe you grow like what is it called? A dry cleaning station at some point. Probably more ridiculous stuff like, one of the things that I thought would be really cool actually was if you could kind of like hire little cute animals to do things for you. So like there's some, I don't know, like cute bunny rabbits or otters or something like that, or like little mice, like the analogy of like mice in your computer making everything work, or hamsters in your computer. Maybe they're like running and putting stuff around and throwing them into washing machines and stuff for you as you do upgrades. So you end up having like a whole like little cute animal staff running everything, and then customers coming in, and it's kind of like this whole semi-automation kind of vibe. But yeah, I'm very cautious because I can think of almost an infinite number of things to do. So we're starting out with a single machine. We're starting out with a single set of stuff. That's how your internet works, like a hamster in a wheel. I think it would be cool. I don't know that I like the scale of the room right now, Yeah, every now and then he gets sleepy. Exactly. Then you have to deal with like feeding the animals and stuff and like giving them a lunch break and whatnot. I'm sure people would have fun with that. And then obviously there would be like different levels, so to speak. Like there would be like a basic laundromat, and then like industrial laundromat, or like, I don't know, stuff like that. But it's very easy to get carried away, I think. So the first thing I have to do is to build this one mechanic, get customers coming in with different stuff. You have to take the stuff from the customers, you have to put them in the machines, maybe do a little, Among Us task, get the stuff back to the customer leaves. You get something for doing that. And I think that's the cycle that I'm aiming for at the moment. And then I think everything else grows out of that. Okay, so right now we have to spawn NPCs manually in. I'm debating between, do we start off with getting a number? I think we do. I think we just start throwing NPCs in. So instead of spawn, right, spawn customer NPC, we have a global observer for spawning customers in, which means we can just send events. This is spawn customer NPC. So all we really need is a system that triggers this. With some randomness. So update, move customer, detect customer drop off. Let's just do customer, I don't know, what do we call this? Arrival? Customer. I don't know, customer spawn cycle sounds right. And then this is, we'll put this below spawn customer NPC. Oh, spawn customer NPC is getting pretty big there. So FN spawn customer, or customer spawn cycle. We are going to want a commands here. Why not by hand? Every level has a preset amount of customers. Stage modifier can't use mammals. Yes. Yes, exactly. Like there's so much that is like can't use helpers, or like helpers cost double, or helpers unionize. Helpers unionize. I feel like cozy games are generally capitalism simulators, which once you realize is very hard to get away from a game design perspective. I think the ones that aren't capitalism simulators tend to be more creative, right? It's like, blank, blank. All right. Sorry about that, y'all. They should be not able to do that anymore. There's an isekai anime where the main character creates a laundry place using slimes as washing machines. Is that... No, that's not the reincarnated as a slime one, right? I haven't watched it yet, but I have a very, very small knowledge of anime. My knowledge of anime is basically what I've seen on TikTok. Which hilariously, I was fully aware of the entire JJK storyline before I ever saw an episode of JJK. Which, you know, going in is probably a good idea. Okay, so we've got trigger. What do we call the event here? Reincarnated as a slime is good? Cool. I officially have a Crunchyroll subscription, but I've only watched like, I don't know, 3 or 4 anime total. I'm a fan of the slice of life, like relaxing ones, like was it Delicious in Dungeon was really good, and then Frieren was also really good. Very much like the casual, we're gonna hang out and life is gonna happen kind of vibe. I don't think this takes any arguments. So how are we going to spawn these? We are going to do some randomness, right? We are going to... want to spawn some at some interval, right? This is going to run every frame. I don't think we actually want it to run every frame. I think we want to put this in the fixed time step. Because this is game logic. So add systems, fixed update, I think is what it's called. When I first started using Bevy, I was not entirely sure what fixed update was for. And I was thinking that you might have multiple fixed updates in a particular game and whatnot. It was really interesting to use for the Snake game workshop. So the fixed update would kind of determine how often the snake could move. Wait, why fixed update? Why fixed update is a great question. Fixed update. I want to look at the Bevy cheat sheet. So, should I put my systems in update or fixed update? The purpose of fixed update is to make gameplay code predictably and reliably, or behave predictably and reliably. This is things like physics and simulation work, any kind of like AI for enemies, networking code, anything that needs to be frame rate independent is the qualifier. So, for example, if we are going to spawn customers in randomly, right? And we're running that in update, update runs once per frame. Fixed update runs roughly once per some, milliseconds or whatever. Fixed update is deterministic in the sense that it runs at like 60 hertz all the time. I think it's 60. Yeah, it's either 60 or 64. So it runs at 60 hertz all the time, right? Which means that if your system runs at 120 FPS or 240 FPS, that you're not doubling the amount of customer spawns that you get, right? That's the issue. The issue is fundamentally like if we're going to spawn customers in and we're going to do so on some randomness, you can imagine it without the randomness, right? Let's say we spawn a customer per frame in update. Then if your frame rate is lower, you spawn fewer customers. If your frame rate is higher, you spawn more customers. That's not good. So instead we use fixed update. Fixed update guarantees that we'll have a set number of updates per second kind of vibe, which means that whether you're running the game rendering at 120, 240, or 30 frames per second, the logic for how the customers spawn in is always the same. So theoretically in like a game that you're playing against your friend, if you're running 120 FPS and they're running 30, you won't get 4 times the amount of customers in your shop. So a delta normalized tick almost. Yes. I would say roughly yes. The thing with fixed update is that it can run multiple times to catch up if it needs to. So if you have a really low frame rate or a really high frame rate, it can adjust a little bit. It's not variable though, in the sense that like update is variable. You can be running at 50 frames per second, one cycle, and then like 80 another cycle, and then 30 another cycle, and then like 120 the next cycle. But yeah, so things like physics need to be done in fixed update. Networking needs to be done in fixed update. Anything that is like gameplay related, you probably want in fixed update. Anything rendering related, you probably want an update, right? You probably want to be reading the stuff from fixed update to display on the screen in update. Because you can imagine if something happens every frame, like update, that probably relates to rendering it on the screen. There's a couple other things too, like app state transitions are labeled as update. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but yeah. Synchronization for network is also really important, right? It's the same reason though, right? If you're running at 120 and I'm running at 30, the game behaves differently potentially, right? Pretty much anything you use delta time for needs to be fixed update. That's reasonable, I think. Yada yada. Yeah, so there's this page on the Bevy cheat book. If you need more information on fixed update, definitely go check it out. There are some updates that have happened fairly recently. In This Week in Bevy, I basically call out a bunch of fixed update stuff. I think every issue for the last like 4 issues. Right? So like this one in particular, this is related to how do you update a camera's transform related to fixed update and update. And this person is writing like prop pickup plugins for Avian. And they're trying to do camera transforms before fixed update. So there's a new system set so that you can run either before or after fixed update, but run every frame. And that went in last week. So that'll come out in 0.15. I think that also impacts Leafwing Input Manager. But yeah, my knowledge about fixed update and when to use it has greatly evolved since I started using Bevy, for sure. And it's one of those things that is non-obvious to people who were not game programmers previously. Okay, so customer spawn cycle run if is running fixed update. I think I'm losing the ability to talk. Spawn customer NPC. Customer NPC spawn event. So let's say I have thread RNG somewhere in here already, right? I'm just going to copy this. If. Oh yeah, you mean if on the fixed update? Yes, that's what I'm looking for. I'm deciding how I want to do the actual spawning. Gen. We don't want a gen bool, I don't think. We want a gen an F32. Is gen a required? Oh, is gen reserved? I feel like I've never seen that before. I guess gen would be reserved for generators. When was this? This was this year effectively. Wasn't that long ago. Interesting. Interesting. Are we getting generators in 2024? That's sick. All right. Anyway, short digression. Oh, I thought you were telling me I needed an if, which I do. No, it just reserves the keyword. Reserves the keyword and adds gen blocks. So was watching your old videos and there was one on the update to Stageless. I'm happy I started using Bevy after it. Yeah, Stageless was a huge improvement. Very, very, very huge improvement. So you're saying that it just reserves the keyword and we probably aren't getting gen blocks? I haven't looked too deep into what's coming in 2024. I know that there was that goals post that came out, which I read, but not going to be stable anytime soon. Okay. Lots of diagnostics work. What a checkbox. Actually, okay, unresolved questions. There is no... This looks like it already got merged. This got merged in October. And this is what we just ran into. RNG Gen got, I guess not renamed. Did it get renamed? What did it get renamed to? Rename RNG Gen to RNG Random. Do we have that version? Should I be using RNG Random now? Doesn't seem like it. I guess we'll keep using Gen. Just leave myself a note that that exists. Add the syntax, not going to be stable. Maybe you're wrong, but that's last time you checked. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I feel like it's really early to be talking about what is going to be in 2024 for sure. F32. Okay. Let's see. Spawn. What do I call this? Spawn, not spawn rate, spawn. Maybe I won't call it anything and I'll just put it inside and I'll say, let spawn rate equal 0.1. And then if RNG Gen less than spawn rate. I feel like I should rename that something else. Let's see what the error is. Generator behaves like JavaScript function generators. Nobody uses JavaScript function generators, honestly. So it's hard for me to say that they do or don't. They probably don't. You don't have to be ashamed that you base any new language on JavaScript knowledge. Like, especially here, I know that some people are very, very much like, oh, one language is better than another. I don't subscribe to that, and I don't really let people subscribe to that when they're around in the spaces that I moderate. So please don't feel ashamed just because you know a different language. So wait, are you already using 2024? Is this a Clippy lint that suggested changing it to RGen? That was a autocomplete. That was, I put this in for Rust Analyzer and I started typing gen and looking for it. And when I hit enter, it did r#gen. And I was surprised by that. So that's why I started looking into it, because it's never done that to me before, as far as I can remember. I'll look it up later. Looks like Python generators. Yeah, I don't know what gen blocks are exactly going to be. I haven't been paying too much attention to generators. It seems like a way to implement iterators. With gen blocks, we can now write for loops and still get a lazy iterator. So gen with a for loop in it, and then you yield whenever it's ready to yield, I guess. So this would be basically like a suspended for loop that is lazy. That's interesting. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that there would be an interpreter for, what is it, like an esoteric language or a whatnot. Yeah, if generators make it into 2024, I will do a video on them. Or gen blocks anyway, not generators in sum total. Cons. Oh, is that from the, okay, that's from the other thing, yeah. I'm not going to look at that yet. So theoretically, this should spawn once every 10 calls on fixed update, which runs like 60 times a second, right? So we should spawn like 6 a second. Here's our zombie horde, if you were looking for a zombie horde. I'm going to record that for later, actually. Let's see. Full screen, no clicks. Where's my full screen? Full screen. Record video. Let's run with the menu so I can full screen it. Variables can be named as any Unicode screen, including numbers. Yeah. Good luck handling this many customers. You can see how the mesh is spawning at different places, though, very nicely with this, which is very cool. I think if they all keep piling into there, they're gonna they're gonna have issues. Trim and convert. Save. Okay, that's saved for later. Okay, so this needs to be like way lower. And also, I think the spawn rate is going to change over the course of the day. So this is probably going to be a resource at some point. Or maybe we make use of the new curve stuff at some point. This is the problem with knowing everything that's coming is like, oh yeah, there's curves in Bevy now. Oh wait, but I have to be on the main branch to use them. Let's make this instead of that's not the right way to do that. 1/60. Because our fixed time step is 60, so this should spawn 1 per second. What programming language would I use for quantum computing? I have no idea. That was a lot of them right there. I guess technically it's possible to spawn more than one a second, because this is actually running 60 times. So theoretically, you know, you get a batch of non-spawns and then a couple spawns. This is gonna have to be way longer though. One over 60, let's see, once a second. Then we will do every 10 seconds, maybe. I have no idea. I have no idea what you use for quantum computing. There are many things that I'm aware of. Many of them I am not aware of. Let's see, here we go. Supposedly once every 10 seconds, we should get a customer. Not really getting any at all, though. Did I do my math right? 1 over 600. 60 per second. Should be like once every 10 seconds. There's one. There's two, three. Suddenly they're all spawning in. That was kind of cool though. Like it came in like a batch. And then some time to actually do something about them. And this is done and we take it back and then we walk over here and we go twink. And then I actually have no idea what's happening for the inventory right now because I think this washing machine only has 5 slots, which would, like, this is too many things. So we need an inventory debug system, which I don't think we're going to build today, but we do have to build at some point. Statistics don't care what you think 10 seconds is. True. True. I also don't know that randomness is actually going to be the way to solve this. You know, we probably want something a little bit more structured where if there's a setup time, we probably don't want anybody to really come into the store during the setup time, first 60 seconds or something, 30 seconds, 10 seconds. Yeah, if you let it run an infinite amount of time, then it's interesting that it went without doing one for so long. It is definitely like too fast, right? Because I don't think we can even get this machine done. Before the next one comes in. And also there's some bug with multiple of them. So if we get rid of this and check the solo, uniform with variation might be better regardless. Yeah. And then peak times. Yeah. I don't know that randomness is ever truly desired for a lot of this kind of stuff. We spawn an NPC, build a thing, grab it, put it over here, wait for it to be done. which realistically, this should light up or something when it's done. Get it back, run it over here. So there's something about spawning multiple NPCs that prevents it from working like that. Let's get our thing in here. Yada yada, click. Hopefully we get this done before the second one comes in. Done, grab it, give it back, it runs away. Nobody's come in yet. An easy workaround would probably be to make the probability of customer spawn depend on the time since last spawn. Oh yeah, you mean like it getting increasingly possible until it's like 10 seconds or whatever is the, you know, the upper limit. So I'm going to hold the items until the second customer spawns. Okay, so that one worked. So let's hold until they're standing here. I'm actually not sure the machine is actually getting emptied, honestly. What is the issue, I think. Expected exactly one machine. Yeah. So when there's multiple on here, the behavior that we've coded for a solo probably glitches out a little bit. And I think that the machine doesn't actually... So done, we get these back. And then we give it to it. And then I guess they're not receiving all of their stuff. We're probably selecting all of them, right? Or something like that. So let's take a look at the logic for the retaining. Oh, right. You know what we don't have? We don't have an association between the items and the NPC. That's what we'll have to do. We have to associate the items with the NPC that gave them to us. And then once that happens, then we can isolate the items that were given and get them back to the right NPC, which can then leave if it has all its stuff. So that'll be easy. Oh, well, yeah. Anyway, let's check the inventory stuff. I think that's probably where I'm going to leave it for today, though. I think I'm pretty happy with that. I do want to keep in mind that I was tired when I started this stream, even though I don't feel tired right now. Inventory wants to be associated with a customer. Otherwise, multiple customers is buggy because returning items goes to arbitrary customer. Just giving stuff back to arbitrary people. So I think in here, we have to have some ID for a customer. We probably have to track the customers. I'm like 50-50 on using the entity ID to track the customers because the entity ID will change if the customers like leave the building. So like a customer could leave, go get lunch, come back. So I think we'll have to have different IDs and a list of customers that have like dropped their stuff off. But yeah, I think I'm happy with that for today. We do have to fix this bug. I think this bug will be the first thing we work on next time. We either have to do an inventory debug scene, or a customer ID. I think we are actually going to have to do both. What you're working on, customers, inventory, is this a cafe tycoon game? Basically, more or less. It's a cozy game. It's supposed to be a laundromat. So you have like machines that you'll be able to place when you do upgrades. You'll be able to take the items from the customers, walk them over to the machines, do some kind of like little Among Us task to get the machine to start working, put the things in the right places. When this processing is done, which will happen in a second, you can pick it back up, walk it back over, and then the customers will leave when they get their stuff back. So yeah, I mean, it's basically a cozy game. It's not, I don't think it's really a tycoon game, but TBD. I think, yeah, in my opinion, the biggest gap between where I want to be and where I am today is the art. I don't have time to do the art for another week or two, so it won't get much better over the next week or two. But then I should be able to put in like a week's worth of art, and it should get dramatically better much faster. Because right now we're kind of just gray boxing. But we have customers spawning, they come in, they get to this point, you can pick up their stuff, give it to the machines can do the work, we can give it back to the customers, and they can leave. So we've basically got the flow working. Yeah. Sounds like you need something like Go App for your AI. Bevy Go App. Did you write that? I'm terrible at remembering usernames. Absolutely terrible at remembering usernames. But I definitely am aware of Dogo app, which I've called Dogo app. Somebody corrected me in the comments. I got to go and look it up again. I forget. I keep calling it Doggo app, which is not what it's called. But yeah, I have to go. Oh, you are the author. Okay, cool. Welcome to the stream. Nice to see you. Yeah, so we'll at least be using a state machine. I don't know how much we actually need in terms of like goal orientedness. It is very directly this, right? Go from here, go to there, drop this off, pick it up. So we may end up using it actually. Oh, there's your name. Why isn't that a link? That needs to be a link. Okay, I'll fix that. But yeah, we may end up using that. We need something. But there's not much for the customers to do just yet. They're just kind of coming in and landing and leaving. So we haven't needed it yet. But we might need to. But yeah, I think that's it for today. I'll see you all next week. Same time. So Saturdays, 8 a.m. PST. Go for about 4 hours every Saturday morning. I think the stream bot is working. It might not be. I don't know. I don't know how to tell whether this streamer bot is working or not. It's so wonky. It's so like up and down. Yeah. This is about the end of the stream. I'm also tired today, or else I would probably continue for a bit longer. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I'll see y'all next time. And hopefully the streamer bot will work next time.